We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. Hey, BraveCo men, I want to take a second real quick and tell you about our BraveCo conference coming up June 12th through the 14th here in Redding, California. This year's theme is Rise Up. Men, we are going to rise up in our families, in our businesses, in our relationships, in our relationship with God. That is what God's doing in our life. If you have not been to one of our conferences before, I would encourage you highly to seriously consider stopping what you're doing, investing in yourself, and coming out to our conference. We don't do it the normal way that conference is done. A lot of guys are like, man, I don't want to sit and listen to a boring conference. You're not going to. Our conferences are super dynamic. In fact, we put each man into a group of 50 men. You have a leader, you have co-leaders that you're running with, you have team colors, team competitions, team pride going on. There's things to win and people to compete against as well. A lot of the ministry is also done inside of your team, which is really cool because you get tons of personal ministry. You also get to minister with other men. The other piece that's really cool about the conference is we are doing a rite of passage for men 12 to 18 years old. Listen, this is so important because if you're a father, you don't want to be the only man pouring into your son. You have this opportunity to introduce your son into manhood with a ton of other men speaking into him, pouring into him, cheering him on. We have a 2.5 mile Tough Mudder course that your son will go through that is incredible. It's full of obstacles. He's going to love it. And he can come through to the conference with you this year. And then we have all kinds of other activations, incredible speakers. The other thing that I'm really excited about this year is every man is going to get a battle plan for his life. What is that? Well, that is a plan that you're building during the conference for the 5 main areas in your life: your finances, your relationships, your relationship with God, your physical health, and your personal self. So you're looking at the different areas of your life and you're going, I want to ensure that when I leave the conference, I have a plan for my life. Our conferences are not mountaintop experiences. It is a catalyst into building a stronger, more powerful, more competent life. You will also have the ability to jump into discipleship at the end of the conference. Again, we're not just throwing on good conferences for guys to feel good. We're actually helping men build stronger lives. So if you want to jump into discipleship and run with the men in your group afterwards, you'll have the opportunity to do that, especially if the other guys want to jump in too. So I want to invite you. Again, that's June 12th through the 14th. I hope to see you there. Welcome back, BraveCo men, to the BraveCo podcast. It is a very sunny day in Redding, California after a long stretch of rain. And I'm not sure when this podcast is coming out, but honest to God, I'm so excited about the rain being gone.
Yeah, a balmy 61 degrees today.
Dang, but it feels
amazing.
Yeah.
I rolled up my sleeves.
I know.
That was nice.
I was just outside and I thought about walking around naked for a little bit, but
that fits.
I just thought about it.
Yeah.
I didn't do it.
That's good. Which leads us to our topic today.
It really does.
It's not exhibition,ism.
It's not.
It's a little less intense than that.
Yeah. If you're wondering who this other voice is talking, this is my good friend, Aaron Zint. Aaron's been on here several times, and he's one of the guys that I bring on regularly because he has so much wisdom. He's such a cool man. He leads our Whole Man project here in Redding, in Bethel. And it's just a guy that I really respect. So Aaron carries just tons of wisdom. So welcome back, Aaron.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
And today, I really like our topic. And at first, guys are going to be like, oh, man, maybe they might be like that.
Yeah, maybe.
But I think most of them are going to be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about mastering your emotions. And I like this topic so much because how many stupid things do you do in your life?
Right. Yeah.
Because your emotions are driving the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So many.
And the reason probably why I think a lot of guys, some guys might actually go, oh, maybe this is one for my wife, or, this is especially one for my wife. Somebody needs this. In reality, it's mastering a lot of people can think, oh, I'm not a very emotional person.
Yeah.
And so they may think, oh, this isn't for me, or I don't need to master my emotions. I just don't have many. Well, that would be fundamentally and biologically incorrect.
It is.
And the majority of your behavior, I'm thinking like 99 point. I actually don't know if it's humanly possible to have a behavior that isn't motivated by some level of emotion, even if it's not identifiable to your articulated mind.
Yeah, it's true. So it's really interesting. Our brains are so complex, and our brains are wired to automate everything in our life as much as possible because, and we've talked about this before in the podcast, but what happens is it's so much effort and energy to be conscious about what you're doing all day long. Like I just took a drink of water and I wasn't thinking, lift the glass up to my lips, tip it, here it comes. Okay, swallow.
Get ready,
yeah,
don't choke.
this is enough. You don't think that, right? Like your brain automates that whole process and you don't think about it. Your emotions are a lot like that. We go throughout our day, and if you're so used to dismissing your emotions, which we're going to talk about this a lot, what happens is you don't even realize why you're doing what you're doing, what's motivating you, why you just said the stupid thing that you said, which we do, like you ever you hear yourself saying something to your wife that you're like, I wish I could stop myself right now, but I'm halfway in. Yeah. It's all that stuff. It's like your brain is just running on autopilot and you end up in the spot where you just feel like, dang it. Why did I look at porn again? Why did I masturbate again? Why did I spend money I didn't really want to spend? Yeah. Why did I say that thing I didn't want to say? Why did I talk like that? Why am I talking like this right now? That's all because we have to learn how to become masters of our emotions. I think a lot when we talk about mastering your emotions, a lot of people would think about like that monk who doesn't feel anything or who is completely closed off.
Yeah.
The problem is you can't shut off one without shutting them all down.
Yeah. Joy and pain are all dug from the same well. So you try to stop one up, you're stopping the entire thing.
It's true. Yeah. And a lot of people, like I had a girl who seemed so happy all the time. And when we sat down, her parents had died a long time ago. And it's a really tragic story, but she had done that. She had stopped all negative emotion. And then what happens is she ends up just binge eating her whole entire life. Yeah. Right. It's like, well, the negative emotion wasn't gone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
She just wasn't conscious of it anymore. So anyways, that's the stuff, guys, that we want to help you become powerful leaders, powerful fathers, powerful husbands, powerful men. And you can't do that if you don't have control over your emotions.
Yeah. I would say the most powerful man in any room is the man who's aware of what's happening in his own mind and his own heart.
Yeah.
Because with awareness, only when you become aware can you actually do something. That's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He says between the stimulus and the response, there's this gap. And within that gap lies man's greatest freedom, his freedom to choose. And so the stimulus of whatever kind of happened in our day and how we respond to that gap allows us, and that may be a micro gap.
Bro, it's small.
But that the ability to become aware of these are the internal drives that are causing me to want to respond this way or do something. Only when you recognize that can you actually choose something different.
Yeah.
Carl Jung is like an old school psychologist, really famous in the field, but he is attributed to saying, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate.
That's great.
And so in the Christian realm, we'd say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life, and you'll call it reality. You'll call it the way God works. You'll call it the way women are.
Yeah.
You'll call it, this is how authority figures are. This is what the government's like. This is what my friends are like. This is how you can rely or not rely on people. And many times we are living out of an unconscious realm, not realizing, oh, I actually have a lot happening beneath the surface that is driving this.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start at square one.
Okay.
What are emotions?
Yeah. So emotions are a biological experience, for one. So I say that to say every person has them. You can't actually turn them off. All you can do is turn off your awareness. And so you'll notice that any kind of emotion, once you become aware of it, there's also a physiological experience that you feel at the same time. So a lot of times helping guys who have felt numb their entire life, I start off by like, we recall a memory or something where they know they felt something. And then I go, okay, tell me what's happening in your physical body.
Yeah.
I go, oh, my shoulders are kind of tight right now. Like when my jaws clench, I actually feel this kind of like fluttering in my chest or this heat. Like there's a physiological experience with emotion that happens. But everything that does happen, these words that we call emotions, these are like just vocabulary and meaning that we've given to an internal physiological experience that everyone is meant to have. And what are these meant to do, though? Like, why did God design us with a literal place in our brain called the amygdala, which is purely designed to make you afraid? Like, I don't think the enemy had a hand in going like, oh God, let me take over part of this brain design and give them the fear center. They're like, oh, it's there because of God.
Yeah.
And so why did God give us an actual physiological thing called emotion? So I would say your emotions are designed to send you messages.
Yeah.
They're
helpers.
It's helpful messages.
Yeah.
Now, what they're not designed to do is tell you what's true or accurate.
That's really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like what you are feeling and experiencing and thinking may not be true, may not be fully accurate.
A lot of times
it's your perception.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Reality isn't reality.
Yeah.
Reality is your reality is based upon your experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I are experiencing this room in two different ways.
Yeah.
Like you may feel threatened. You may have had brothers and men in your life that are always setting you up to fail.
Yeah.
And so like we're doing the podcast and you're like, I know he's going to set me up at some point to look dumb. He's going to ask me a question, right? Like that could be your experience.
Totally.
And I'm like, oh, we're having a great time. Like this is a great experience where that is like, that's part of your emotional experience is interlocked in there.
My wife goes, hey, can you unload the dishwasher for me? And what explodes within me is, she's trying to control me again. I'm not doing this, Mom. I mean, wife, you know, this is what's happening on the inside that we don't even realize is going on. And it may not be reality at all. What it is a message to from your internal world saying, hey, there is actually something you care about, there's something you value, and there's usually, and pretty much what we're going to get to, there's something you believe.
Yeah.
And that belief is what's the majority of the time driving our like heightening those emotions or triggering those emotions in the first place.
Yeah.
If you think about it in the like remove some of the belief system parts, but just you see something moving around on the ground. Like this is when you see the cucumber videos with the cats, there's that part in them, they go like snake, they jump like the moment a cat sees a cucumber. Well, we have these kinds of things built into us that when we see something that we consider a threat, we will act like it's a threat. It's like a smoke detector that goes off in your house and you go like, oh no, there's a fire. The smoke detector is not actually supposed to tell you what's happening. It's just supposed to tell you there is something happening.
Yeah.
And so your job is to either decide, is the house on fire or did somebody blow out a candle? And a lot of
Right.
times our reactions to our the people, important people in our life, or me sitting here with you going like, oh, he's gonna screw me over somehow in this conversation. I'm gonna look like an idiot. That's my brain going, the house is on fire, when in reality there's a wisp of smoke somewhere, and I can go, oh, it's actually nothing.
Yeah.
So
he
that's what
left
it's
the
designed
toast
to do.
in too long and
Yeah,
it's burning.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the important thing and really helpful thing, two things. One is emotions aren't good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And we typically have categorized good emotions
Mm-hmm.
and bad emotions.
Yeah, the good ones are the ones that make me happy, and
Yeah.
the bad ones are anything that is not
makes
bad.
me sad. Yeah. Or everyone else.
Yeah.
But emotions aren't good or bad. And when my wife and I were kind of learning and diving deeper into emotions, we started to go through this process of like me feeling angry in a day,
Mm-hmm.
or me feeling angry in a moment of the day was neither good or bad. Like, I'm not trying to feel angry. I didn't wake up wanting to feel angry. I wasn't going like, wow, I hope I'm angry today.
Yeah.
It's just where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel really sad. Like, my wife's not wanting to feel sad right now. She's not trying to feel sad. She just does feel sad. And if you categorize them as good and bad, then you never are actually able to empathize and share that experience with your partner, because you're trying to solve something that oftentimes doesn't need to be solved. It needs to be experienced. And you will often diminish something like, oh no, it's okay. Like, I do that with my kids sometimes. They're crying and I'm like, you're all right. You're all right. You're all right.
Stop feeling.
Yeah. And I realize like, oh, I'm so used to trying to get him back to happy because happy's good and crying's bad, as opposed to I can make him feel loved, cared for, and connected.
Yeah.
If I just go, oh, do you feel sad right now?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And so in our minds as kids, I really want guys to think about this right now. Like, we get programmed to think of good and bad emotions, share the good ones and hide the bad ones.
Yep.
What are you excited about? How are you doing today? When's the last time somebody asked you in church, how you doing? And you actually said, I'm not doing good.
Yeah. I'm real sad.
I've been talking to myself horribly all week. And the truth is like, that's probably more true than what we're telling people. But we get really used to this. If you tell them, I'm having a really tough day, I've been feeling sad lately, it's like, something's wrong with you. Well, we all feel all of the emotions almost every single day. Right. So that's the other thing, is we have felt we should go through the emotions, but in a day, I will feel shame. I will feel guilt. I'll feel lonely. I'll feel sad. I'll feel angry. I'll feel happy or joy.
I will feel hurt.
I'll feel hurt.
Feel fear.
And fear. Yeah. So there's your emotions, right? At least if you look at different emotion wheels,
those are like the primary colors of the emotions. There's a lot of variations you can make from mixing those.
Yeah. Which is great. But the truth is like, man, I felt all those things in a day.
Sometimes in a single moment. Yeah.
And so I want to like debunk this thing in people that says there's good and bad, because there's not good and bad. There just is. Now, I would often rather feel joy, if I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah.
But that is not the purpose of an emotion, is to make me feel good or bad. They just are.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really important is to understand how emotions are created. And emotions are created through our thoughts. So and this is really important that you understand the origin, because if you don't understand the origin, you'll do all kinds of things to feel better or to try to be aware of what's happening. But if you don't understand where it's originating, then it's an uphill. You're fighting blind, basically.
You're fighting a symptom when there's actually something going on beneath the surface that's causing it.
Yeah. And so your emotions are coming from your thoughts. And now listen, your mind and your body are influenced by so many things. So I really want to highlight this. Like, if you have a chemical imbalance, you won't feel right. And it will be much harder to manage your thoughts. If you're high on drugs, you can have incredible thoughts that don't last forever. But I'm just saying, like you ever see someone, they drink alcohol and alcohol makes them angry? You're like, wow, this person is really angry. And it could be because they lose their inhibition and, or people get high and they feel way better. And okay, so your body's like that too. Like if you don't have, like if you have a vitamin D deficiency, you're way more prone to depression. If you have an imbalance in testosterone, like really, really, really low testosterone for men, it's like, man, you're fighting an uphill battle. Well, your body doesn't feel good and that's affecting you physically and psychologically and emotionally. Right. And so that really affects you. But to make it really simple for guys, it's what you're thinking, right? It's what's going on inside of your mind. And that's massive to understand.
So when we talk about like mastering your emotions, you have to understand that the belief systems that are causing the thought patterns that are causing a lot of these emotions, because mastering your emotions starts with becoming aware, one, that that you have them. So we're going to stop ignoring this myth that men are less emotional than women. As long as you're human, you have emotion and you have it all the time, every day. So becoming aware of them and actually putting language to it, getting a vocabulary around the sensations that you're experiencing in your body and being able to go, oh, that's what fear feels like. Even on a low level, like most of the time, most of us can say, yeah, I know when I'm feeling level 7, 8, 10 fear. Yeah. Because you're screaming or running.
There's a train coming at me and
I'm standing pounding out of your chest. But the fear that goes unnoticed for the most part is this, like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to that place on time. That's going to be a low level fear. And yet those things, that's actual fear and it actually happens. So mastering your emotions has to start with becoming aware that they're there, they're happening, and being able to put a name to it. But it doesn't just stop there. Like just becoming aware that you have them. I think what some people have said is like, hey, I'm more aware now, but it feels like now I just feel them all the time and I don't know what to do with them and they're running amok. So you can't master them until you know that they exist. But then you have another step from there.
Well, it's a really good point because in our culture today, so I feel like 15 years ago, let's go 100 years ago, like emotions didn't really matter a ton. And a lot because like when you grow up life's hard. And the harder life is, the less people want to talk about it. And like pioneers and freaking forging a life, carving a life out of this earth was tough. And so, our grandparents, my parents, mom and dad, they didn't talk about their emotions at all. They're tough freaking people. And
they went through the Depression and they went through the Dust Bowl.
All the wars.
They had to survive that
World War, Civil War, not Civil War, World War I and II, like all that stuff, right? Vietnam, like people went through such tough stuff. And so the tendency is to shut the emotions off, like we've talked about. But our generation, the tendency often is to be hyper emotional, right? True. To make decisions based upon how you feel.
Right. Your feeling is the highest truth that you should react out of. Well, we get back to that original thing that we said. Your emotions are telling you something. They're sending you a message. They're not telling you what reality is.
They're not telling you what reality is. Yeah. And so when Aaron's talking about, okay, the first step is to be able to recognize, right? Like I'm having an emotion right now. I'm aware that something's happening inside of me that I really need to pay attention to. To me, it is key, right? Like it's massive. To me, the next step is to actually go, okay, what's the story that I'm telling myself? And man, I often ask myself that question. The first time it was the first time I had someone asking me that, it was actually Margaret Nagib, Dr. Margaret Nagib.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had her on the podcast before.
Mhm.
She's awesome. And I think we did a whole thing on anxiety. But I was we were out to lunch and she was asking me about my job. This was 2017, I think.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really hate my life right now. I feel so stuck in my life and I'm not enjoying it, blah, blah, blah. She goes, what's the story you're telling yourself? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't thought about the story I was telling myself. All I thought about was how much I hated it. And I felt unmotivated and depressed. And I come to find out, like, I'm telling myself the story that I don't actually even know is true. I'm stuck. It's boring. And whatever, like if you can start to unpack that story, this works really great in every situation, right? Like I go home and I get into a conversation with my wife. We get into an argument and stopping and actually going, what's the story I'm telling myself?
Yeah.
Story I'm telling myself is she thinks that I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Or she's trying to control me, or she's like, that piece is massive.
Yeah.
Because the difference between waking up in the morning and going, my life's amazing, and me waking up in the morning and going, my life sucks, is the story.
It's the story you're telling yourself. Yeah. Yeah. You know, you'd mentioned like, Aaron, if I had big brothers that, you know, always were like found a way to just make me look dumb in front of people, we'd be sitting here and I'd be feeling like some tenseness in my chest. And if I could become aware, I go, oh, I feel some fear. And then I go, hey, what's the story that I'm telling myself? Because this fear is driven by something.
Yeah.
I don't actually find you scary, but there's something happening. So I go, oh, the story I'm telling myself is that Jason is waiting for the perfect moment to undercut me and throw me under the bus and make fun.
I am.
Always.
That's happening.
So that is true, but no, just kidding. But then my wife walks in the other night. So she went out to do something with some friends. And so I was home with the kids and I had a long day. So I was like, okay, the house needs to be cleaned. I'm aware of this. And I need some time to myself. So I think I'm going to watch a movie. So I was on my phone watching a movie. My wife walks in and she goes, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, watching a movie. And I'm like thinking, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then she goes, did you start dinner for the kids? I look at my watch, it's 6:30. I'm like, no. And she goes, okay. And then she walks into the kitchen and instantly I'm like, I feel shame. I feel anger. And why do I feel anger out? Because here's the story I'm telling myself. She asked me this question because she's expecting me and I can't have any time. She thinks it's not important for me to have time to myself. Yeah. She thinks I should get home from my one job and start doing my other. So I got narrative, like stories running like crazy in my head. We're fighting in my head. And I'm like, and in your mind, she went, he's really irresponsible. Yeah. No, that was like, I can't believe that you would be so lazy that you care about yourself so much. You're so selfish that you would watch a movie and neglect food. Your kids are starving in the living room. So all this stuff is happening. I walk in, my wife's fantastic. And so I'm like, I start to say something and she looks up and is totally like, doesn't have the look on her face that I pictured in my mind. And then she goes, oh yeah, how was your day? And she asks kindly. And I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't match the wife. We're in a war right now. You don't know this, but yeah, this is guerrilla warfare. It's happening all in my brain. So massive stories constantly about what we think other people are saying, what we think their motives are. Honestly, the stories, for me, the majority of my stories have to do with my relationships and how somebody else is perceiving me, thinking about me. But we have stories about God, about the way, like, oh, the story I'm telling myself is that God's ashamed of the way I manage my finances. Yeah. So if I can't actually ask him for provision right now because he's just too upset at me for the way I've managed myself. You can even go through your life and say, what's the story I tell myself about my wife? Mm-hmm. What's the story I'm telling myself about my finances? What's the story I tell myself about who I am as a man? Like, because often that's how we start to solve the cyclical stories. So if you notice, men, that you regularly end up in a spot emotionally, right? Like, I feel
sad or depressed 3 out of 6 days, it's because you're telling yourself that story over and over and over and over again, right? And that's where you start to dive into, like, you'd want to unpack that. Like, what is the story that I'm telling myself? Because now it's become a thought pattern. And I have this, it's more than a thought pattern. It's a belief system. It's a thought pattern because it's a belief system. So I have this belief system. It's not just I walk outside and it's raining and I go, bull. Rain isn't fun. I have to stay inside. There's not much to do. That's actually what I'm thinking when it's raining outside. Not much to do. It's cold. I'm not going to have a fun day. Therefore, I feel sad. That's different than I walk out 3 out of 6 days and I go, gosh.
I open my eyes in the morning when my alarm goes off and I go, I'd rather sleep the entire day. Not because I'm tired, but because I'm tired of my life.
Yeah. And so, okay, you don't have an emotion problem. You have a belief system going on, or you have an area in your life that you need to, both. You have an area in your life that you actually need to stop and really address, right? Like, I need to address this past pain in my life. I need to address how I see myself. Maybe I actually really don't feel proud of the way that I've been living because I've been living like a guy who's coming out of hell.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I treat people poorly. I talk to myself poorly. Whatever. And so I actually am not living a life that I'm proud of. And so it's like, I think that's the other piece to this puzzle is a lot of people want to think themselves into happiness without addressing the root issue. And again, back to our world today, we're talking about how to master emotions. Back to our world today says, love yourself the way that you are. You don't have to change at all. And the truth is that you should love yourself because God first loved you, because he designed you and made you like him. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to change anything.
Yeah.
So when you are acting outside of God's character, you should be met with conviction.
Yeah.
And a tiny bit of shame.
Yes. Shame that says like, hey, you're way better
You're
than
way
this.
better than this.
Yeah.
That conviction, right? Yeah. Like, I can't go spit at somebody and then say, I should feel good about that.
It's who I am. I'm living my truth, man.
Yeah. I'm 300 pounds and I should feel good about that. Like, the truth is, you don't feel good about that unless you're 7'4", because you're not taking care of yourself the way that God designed you to operate. And so, again, I don't want to go on too many rabbit trails, but I feel like we have to kind of corral this like modern thought and what the world is wanting to tell you. Like, you can love you just the way that you are. And it's like, well, you don't shame yourself into real productive growth.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't lie yourself into a happy, healthy life.
Yeah. You can't shame yourself and you can't lie yourself into it either.
No. So you have to really go like, okay, this is really where I'm at, right? Like, my marriage is in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
So I'm waking up every day going, my life sucks. All right. What's the truth? The truth is my marriage does suck, but I'm powerful to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. Or I don't have financial freedom. You ever not had financial freedom before? Yeah. In and out of those seasons. Me too. And I can get depressed and go like, okay, I have a problem. What's the problem? I continually end up without enough money. I mean, this is a story. I just told this story on the last podcast. Like, I end up without the finances that I need.
You should have had me on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I had you on this one.
We can commiserate.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay. What's the truth? The truth is, I have to come up with a plan. I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm powerful. This isn't going to be my whole life. I'm not going to stay here forever. Right. Like, I'm not denying.
Yeah.
And I'm not just hyping myself.
Right.
But I'm also changing the way that I'm talking to myself.
Yeah. So there's an old saying that your emotions are like kids. You don't want them at the wheel of the car.
Yeah.
but you can't lock them in the trunk either.
That's great.
What happens, I think you have two kinds of guys, especially guys who have learned to lock their emotions in the trunk.
Yeah.
And they think like, hey, that's where they belong. But as a kid, I accidentally got locked in the trunk of my car, like playing one day. You know how I got out?
Through the seat?
No, that was locked too. Like it was no way out. I screamed and kicked until my dad heard me. And so he was in the kitchen like, man, what is that? And then eventually came outside and heard, and then opened the trunk. This is what happens inside of us when we deny or we become unaware. Our emotions are trying to send us messages. And when they can't get through to us, they get louder. Excuse me, with a way that they scream for a lot of guys is through addiction, is through video games, is through hours and hours of coping in one way or another. Like our emotions are begging for us to get a message. And then when we don't listen, they get louder and then we go find a way to quiet them. But we also can't have them driving the car, in that my emotions don't get to tell me what's true about my wife, about God, or about who I am, about my situation. And so I think of them like, if we think of them like kids, where do kids belong in a car? They belong in the back seat, buckled. Now, I actually want to hear what they have to say. I go, oh yeah, okay. Oh, you feel some fear about that. Oh, you feel some shame about your wife coming in and the house being a wreck. Like, oh, I can hear that. And here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still at the wheel, and the person that's at the wheel right now, that's my spirit led. I'm connected to Holy Spirit, and I go like, okay, what's true? Okay, I'm a good man. I'm a good provider, and I can get up and go do the dishes right now.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole slew of options. We just can't have them in the wrong place in our lives.
Okay. So in order to like really master your emotions, you recognize them, check the story you're telling yourself, and find out like, what is that message? Now you need to offload them. Yeah. You have to actually process through. Yeah. And so remember, again, your emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. And so your emotions have a life cycle as well. It's really important to like think through this. So for instance, like my son yesterday was really angry because he couldn't do something. He wanted to go out and ride his bike, and it was time for him to come in. And so he starts to ramp up, right? He's really angry. He's 2. He's almost 2.
Oh, I thought you were talking about one of your older sons. No,
he's almost 2, you know?
Yeah.
So I pick him up, he's screaming, literally. And so at first I'm like, Liam, you can't scream. I'm telling him, you can't scream, it's okay. We're going to go inside. We can't play. Like I'm telling him, you can't play outside, and I'm trying to reason with him. Yeah. Can't go outside anymore. We got to go inside. We have to eat. And he's screaming, rah, blah, blah, blah. And then I realize, oh, I need to actually address the emotion. Mm-hmm. So I said to him, this is God's honest truth. Yeah. Are you feeling sad? He's almost 2. He goes, yeah. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, buddy, I understand feeling sad. Did you want to go outside? Yeah, I wanted to go outside. You wanted to ride your bike, huh? Uh-huh. He's not screaming anymore. Yeah. Now he's just kind of crying. Yeah. You wanted to go outside and ride your bike, huh? Yeah. Oh, buddy, I know how that feels. I want you to be able to ride your bike too. Is it time for dinner? Yeah, it's time for dinner. And I said, okay, we're going to eat dinner, and then tomorrow I'll take you out and ride your bike. Okay. He needed to go through that process of talking about what was happening. And as a parent, this has been so incredibly helpful, because instead of trying to just put a lid on the kid's emotions, right? Like bottle them up. Yeah. As soon as I address them, you feel sad, you feel angry, you feel lonely. My daughter Edie will tell me, I feel lonely today. And I'm like, oh, babe, tell me about that. She'll say, I want to play with Becca, or I want to play with one of my friends. And before, as a parent, when I was a younger parent, I would want to talk her out of that, but now I've learned, like, if I address it, it will. And so for me personally, it works like that too, right? Like I've realized what I want to do is shove down what I'm really feeling. If I had a friend ask me today, we were talking about a financial decision that has to be made. And he said, we're talking about all these different bills that we have to pay. He said, okay, what do you think about that? And I said, well, I feel a lot of fear, actually. I feel a lot of fear because I'm not sure that I'll be able to sustain that payment and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, well, we can solve it. I said, I actually don't need to solve it. I think we're doing the right thing. You asked me what I think about it. And what I actually think is, I think I feel afraid. And he was like, oh no, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
Because once I could wrap my mind around this feels scary. I'm not sure that I want to do this. I'm not sure if I can do this. Am I going to be able to sustain this? Do I have what it takes? Then I'm able to come down.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important, right? Like every day we should be in a rhythm, in a routine. If you want to master your emotions, you're not going to do the ninja thing and hide them. You're not going to block them out of your life. You're not going to somehow.
And you're not going to talk yourself out of, you're not going to rationalize your way out of, oh, you know what? No, because God's always taking care of me, so I don't need to feel this.
It's the wrong thing to do.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to read 5 scriptures so that I feel better. That can be a part of your process.
A part of it. Yeah.
But your step, once you realize like, oh, this is how I'm feeling, or I'm not sure how I'm feeling, you need to start communicating out loud.
Yeah.
Or on a journal. Like you need to tell somebody. You need to, my wife and I practice this a lot. And it's taken, like, this is a learning curve. This is hard because it takes a lot of freaking courage. Because on top of whatever you're feeling, you're probably feeling afraid.
Yeah.
Because you have to share it, right? But when you start to share it, this is what actually mastering your emotions looks like, is they're not running me. I'm talking about it. I'm going, I feel like a loser at work. I feel embarrassed. I feel, the other day I was saying, I feel like I should be further along than where I'm at. And I don't know what emotion to put to that yet. Right. It's like, this is what's happening. I'm unpacking and I'm allowing myself to go on this emotional journey while talking about it. I don't know that this is really how I feel. I'm not sure that this is the whole story, but this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And really, I'm unleashing the power of it. So it's not staying inside, it's coming outside here.
I would think of emotions almost like it's like a charge, like a charge needs to be released.
Yeah.
And so without, or it's just like pressure, when you feel it and you don't do anything with it, it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays and builds up pressure in your system. And so again, why we use addiction or different things, because the pressure is so great. We're like, I need some way to relieve this pressure.
Yep.
But the simpler way to do this and to do it on a regular basis so that you don't build up that pressure is just one, to name it. And you have to be aware to name it, but then to name it out loud. Like me and my wife usually say, we tell God and at least one other person.
Yeah.
So I go like, oh man, I feel really afraid. I saw my bank account this morning. That was a lot lower of a number than I was hoping for. And I felt fear. And so I'm like, Lord, I feel some fear around this, that we're not going to be okay. We're going to, if I extrapolate on this, I'm like, I feel fear that we're going to lose our house when I see that number. And then I tell somebody, and what happens in that moment is you get known.
Yeah.
The majority of like how trauma stays in our system and creates things like PTSD, or maybe not as intense as that, but it informs the way that we respond or react to people, is that we experience pain. We experience some strong emotion, but we were alone in it.
Yeah.
And we didn't know how to process it. So when we have a moment of pain, even if it's low level, and we're able to share that with somebody, what it does is it processes out of your system. It doesn't build up pressure, and is really the antidote, or the way that trauma is healed is when somebody is there to bear witness to your pain. And so, I use words like trauma stuff to talk about the big stuff, but this happens on low levels all day. Like I just texted my buddy. I'm like, hey, we have a bachelor party this weekend for one of my good friends. And I realized like, I'm kind of like, I was managing one guy in our group, and I was like, what's happening here? Oh, I feel fear. Oh, what's the story? The story that I'm telling myself is that he doesn't like the couple things that we have planned, and that he's going to be super bummed out if we do that. So like, oh, that's why I was trying to like manage everybody. So then I just texted one of the guys. I'm like, hey, I feel some fear that these things that we have planned, you're not going to like, and that it's actually going to bum you out. That's the story that I'm telling myself. And he goes like, oh, dude, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Like, that's not true, but thanks.
Yeah.
And even when I share stuff that's not directly connected to somebody else just going like, yeah, I get that, man. That's hard. Sometimes that's literally all I need. And then it's
true. Yeah. And that is so massive, right? Like, coming to a place in my life as I get older where I am okay with what I feel. And I am less and less and less and less insecure about it.
Yeah.
Has been so incredibly helpful, because what that does is it allows the world around me, my wife, to really share how she feels. It's allowed me to handle my kids, my friends, to not have to put on this face all the time.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel free in my life.
Yeah.
I really do. I feel like people, like the last podcast guest I have, he says like, thank you so much for your vulnerability. And the truth is, like, I protect my vulnerability so I protect my freedom. Because I don't want to try to be someone that I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't want to be stuck in this prison of having to be perfect and flawless, and this leader that maybe some people think that I am. That, like, I want to be a great leader, and I want to be someone that people look up to because of how I manage myself in spite of what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And that to me is like what we're going for, right? Like, if we can be real men that show up in our everyday life and really manage and master what we're going through, not because we practice stoicism and hide what we're feeling, not because we hype everything in Christianity, like, I gave that to God, God's just doing it. It's like, well, that's great if after you have experienced the reality of what you're feeling, okay, you see this beautiful picture in the Psalms where David is like, why are you forsaking me? Why are you betraying me? My enemies surround me on every side. They pursue me. I'm like a small, tiny little grasshopper, and my bones are shaking. Even like, you can go through the Psalms and find all of that.
You could be like, wait, that's not theologically correct, David, whatever.
And then you'll see but you, God, are my rock. You're my fortune. He's not going, la, 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 la. He's actually going like, these are all the things I feel.
Yeah.
This is what I'm coming up against. And so I really love this. The Bible has a couple scriptures that will end on this that I think are really helpful for, okay, how do you partner with God in these hard times? Well, you do all this stuff, right? Like, you're feeling down, you're feeling emotional, you realize, like, I got some belief systems, I got some cycles. Great. Well, the Bible's got a recipe for that. It's like, don't deny it, but now let's apply some scripture to it. So James 1 has been a life verse of mine. It says, consider it pure joy or hilarious laughter when you fall into unexpected trials, for the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And when perseverance runs its course, you will lack nothing. And so it's saying, like, how you get through a hard time is you choose joy. Consider it joy. It doesn't say deny it. Consider it joy, knowing that you're being led to a place where you don't lack anything. You're on a journey. You're on God's journey, right? And then it goes on to say, if anyone needs wisdom, ask for it, but ask in faith, because the man who doesn't ask in faith is a double-minded man, wicked in all his ways. It's really interesting. So it goes on. It's saying, like, you only need wisdom if you're really looking at the problem. You're trying to solve this problem and you're going, I don't know how to solve it. I love this because it's like, this is totally what we're talking about. And the Bible says, if you don't know how to solve a problem that you're in, right? Consider it pure joy and fall into unexpected trials. Okay, you're in this problem. You don't know how to solve it. It's saying, posture yourself. This is going to work out, right? Yeah. I'm in a really hard time. I don't have as much money as I want in the bank. I'm not sure how to produce that. Okay, this is going to work out for me. Good. I know this is great. I'm in the middle of this problem trying to solve it. And I go, I don't know how. I'm going to ask God with faith. He is going to supply the answer for me. I'm going to stay in the middle of this storm. It's like, I like to picture it like when in football, when the center hikes the ball, the quarterback is now in a pocket. He's got all this protection around him, and all of the defenders are rushing him, and they're trying to get to him. The safest place for him to be in that moment is in the pocket, is inside of that protection. And if he runs out of that too quickly, then he's outside of that protection. So that's what I like to look at. Like, okay, I'm in the protection. I've got all these guys. Now I have to think clearly. I got to trust that God's going to give me an answer for this. I also like Philippians 4, because Philippians 4 says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness and kindness be evident to all. The Lord's near. So it's saying like, don't act like an a-hole. God's watching what you're doing, right? Like he's around, he's paying attention. And it goes on to say, rejoice in all, be evident to all. It goes on to say, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. It goes on further down and it says, finally, brothers, focus on whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's praiseworthy, whatever's cool, whatever's awesome, whatever's beautiful. Focus on this. And it says, and the God of peace, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. So there's this really cool, like when you're in a really hard time, God goes, hey, listen, if you will change the story, not augment reality, not throw reality away, but if you'll change the story and focus on what can you do? What is going right? What is God going to do? And this is where Viktor Frankl's life comes in, where he's in a Nazi prison camp. His friends and family are killed and burned in the ovens. He's starving to death. And he realizes the only thing that people can't steal from me is my ability to choose.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is my superpower. So he makes a powerful choice. What's lovely, what's holy, what's pure, what's praiseworthy. Spends the rest of his life traveling around, gets rescued, spends the rest of his life traveling around, teaching people how to have a powerful life, not because they gained wealth, not because their circumstances changed, but because they made a powerful choice, internal choice to decide what they're going to focus on. And to me, like it's the game.
Yeah, that's good, man. The couple scriptures that have been a lifeline for me in this realm is Matthew 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Yep.
This idea that, hey, you don't get comfort unless you mourn.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't actually receive the comfort that I need unless I allow myself to feel and share. Mourning is like I'm expressing the thing that's happening inside of me. And then cast your cares upon him because he cares about you.
Yeah, that's great.
See, these are like, we have to be willing to share this stuff. And then the next step after that is what you're saying. We can go, okay, I have shared it. I'm not suppressing it. I'm not hiding it. But now here's where I'm at the driver's seat. And I go like, okay, Lord, what is true?
Yeah.
What is this? What's the story? Like if Jesus was walking, what's the story Jesus would be telling himself about his bank account if that happens? Like, and if he's in me and he's for me and I look at my bank account, what's the story? I don't think he's going like, oh crap, like he's got loaves and fishes and he's multiplying this stuff. And so we can connect with his story. We can actually make a choice to go like, what kind of story am I going to tell myself now that I know the one that I've been saying for long enough?
It's great. All right.
Okay.
Well, it's awesome. Guys, we want you to be masters of your emotions. So we can all put this into practice this week. BraveCo man, hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. If you do, please share it with a friend, like and subscribe. Otherwise, have an incredible week. We will see you next week on the BraveCo podcast. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.